Did you know that if a home has a mortgage on it, it can still be placed inside of a living trust? Now, in this video, we're going to break down how that's done, why it's important, and the rules around the dreaded due on sale clause. My name is Michael Pevney. I'm an estate planning lawyer in California. I create estate plans for California families. If you don't have that estate plan set up and you'd like to, you can set up a time to meet with me for free by clicking on the link in the comments, ocestateplanlawyer.com. So we're going to talk about how we can place a mortgaged home into a trust, how that ownership is recognized, and what due on sale clauses have to do with any of this. So the short answer is yes, a home with a mortgage can be placed inside of a living trust. The mortgage does not necessarily have to be paid off first. The reason is because the mortgage lender has a lien on the home, which is in place whether or not the home is placed on a trust. When I talk to clients a lot, I ask them if they own any real estate. And sometimes the answer I get is, well, the bank really owns it. I don't own it yet because I have a mortgage on it. And legally, that's not necessarily true. What the bank does have is a secured loan, meaning it is secured on your property, meaning if you do not pay the mortgage on the home, eventually they can go through foreclosure proceedings to foreclose on that home and eventually take control of that home. But that only happens if you don't pay the loan. The person or people that own the home are the people that are on the title to the home. They have the control about whether or not the home can be sold, whether there can be modifications made to the home or add-ons, and that sort of thing. So first, let's talk about primary residences, because there's a difference between primary residences and non-primary residences like a rental home or a vacation home. So in order to put a primary residence, the home that you live in and own, if there's a mortgage on it, into a living trust, the rule is you get to put it in there. If we're talking about a typical revocable living trust that you control or you and your spouse control, typically what we're going to do, so my wife is Heather, I'm Michael, we would transfer the home from Michael and Heather to Michael and Heather as trustees of the Michael and Heather Living Trust, and then the date that that trust was created. And if that mortgage happens to have a due on sale clause, it is absolutely unenforceable. So there's very clear federal law on this. It's called the Garn-St. Germain Act. It was created in 1982, so some time ago, and part of it was created for specifically this purpose, to get the benefits of a living trust without the bank saying, hey, there's this old-fashioned due on sale clause, and we get to enforce it if there's a change in ownership of the home, because technically you become the owners, rather the trustees instead of the owners. But if we're talking again about a revocable living trust, which is the type of trust that I create for most of my clients, there should be no issue at all. If someone tries to tell you or enforce that due on sale clause, you can tell them to pound sand because they don't get to do that. Now, that isn't always quite the case when it comes to non-primary residence. If we're talking about a vacation home or we're talking about a rental home, sometimes there might be a due on sale clause as a part of that mortgage. And technically, maybe if they wanted to, they could enforce that and say, you know what, the entire loan is due. Now, in my personal experience, it is very, very rare. In fact, in my personal practice, I've never seen it happen to a client if they put their home, that's a rental home, inside of a living trust that still has a mortgage on it. All that being said, and obviously this is not legal advice, this is information only, it's always going to be a good idea to check with the bank to make sure that it's okay to put that home inside of a living trust. So it's always going to be a good idea to check with the bank just to make sure. It's always going to be good practice to do that because, well, think about it. Why would they not want you to put it in a trust? Because first of all, you're still personally liable to pay that mortgage. And if you don't pay it, they still have the ability to foreclose on the home. What banks are interested in, and the reason that they gave you that mortgage, is that you are trustworthy enough to pay it back. Banks make money by you paying the interest on your loans. So how do we put a home that has a mortgage on it inside of a trust? So first we've got to get a hold of the deed, the current deed to the home. We've got to ensure that it is in your name or you and your spouse's name. And then, of course, to put it in a trust, there has to be a trust. Hopefully, you're working with a qualified estate planning lawyer to set up that trust, and that estate planning lawyer can prepare a new deed that transfers the ownership of that home from your name, or maybe you and your spouse, to you or you and your spouse as trustees of the trust that has just been created. So the trust has to exist before we actually put the property in the trust. Then the deed is taken down to the county clerk recorder's office, as we call it in California. Sometimes it's a land records office, that sort of thing. And that's how the transfer is completed. And now the home is still completely controlled by you, even though the title is under the name of the trust, because it is a revocable living trust. You have the complete control over that home, the power to sell it, the power to rent it out, the power to add on to it, to do whatever you want, unless you've got weird town restrictions about, your Airbnb or short-term rentals or that sort of thing. So why would we even want to do this in the first place? Why place a home inside of a trust, whether it has a mortgage on it or not? So probate, we want to avoid probate. So remember, if you've seen my videos before, probate is the court system. It's the government-controlled asset distribution program that kicks in if you pass away without property, especially real estate, inside of a trust. Even if you have a will, it's got to go through probate. It takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money, and you don't have choice really in who it goes to. In California, in the area where I practice, costs, if the main asset is the home, costs around $50,000, takes about 1.5 to 2 years to get that home passed along to who eventually are going to be the beneficiaries. With a trust, that doesn't happen. So it is oftentimes a very good practice to put real estate inside of a trust. It can also provide some protection from those that you leave behind. So let's say you want to leave things to kids, and let's say one of those kids happened to be going through a divorce. At the time that you pass away, the trust is going to have very specific provisions that that home cannot be released from the trust to the name of the child if they happen to be going through a bankruptcy or a divorce or a lawsuit or some sort of serious issue in their life where that property is going to become up for grabs and sort of go right out the window as soon as the inheritance actually happens. That is not true for things that pass by way of probate. So in this video, we talked a little bit about how to get a home that has a mortgage on it into a living trust, the difference between a primary home and a non-primary home, a rental or a vacation home, and the process to do that. Obviously, we have to have a trust set up before we put something into it. So if you have any questions about this or anything else related to estate planning, please ask it in the comments. You can always go to my website, which is going to be in the description, ocestateplanlawyer.com. And if you live in California and it's time to set up that trust, or you have a home that is not inside of a trust and you want to avoid your kids or those that you leave behind about $50,000 in probate costs in a couple of years in court, you can set up an appointment to meet with me for free. So I appreciate your time and thanks for your attention.